live stream to YouTube.
Okay.
So
yeah, I don't have any of that.
Yeah. So I guess because I signed in first, that let me be the host. And
Okay. Well, I did click a button that said stay co-host. It was removed.
Oh, okay. Well, if you had clicked host, you would want to be the host.
I don't think I'm not sure I had that option. It was like remove yourself or stay co-host.
Oh, okay.
So it might have been the first person who signs in then, maybe.
I think that may be the case.
Okay.
So
all right. Good.
I was at some point, I have in the past seen where I could switch that. Let me see. Maybe I can do that here. Yeah. Let me see if I can do that. It's not letting me do that. It says I'm the host, but it says you're a co-host. Let's see. I can make you the host. So I'm making you the host.
Okay.
Now, I'm unfortunate.
Now I see more.
Okay. And click on that just to be sure. I don't see it anymore.
Okay. So, it says stop live stream. So that's probably good.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So we're all set.
Okay. So that's the finding, because when we went through our training, that was
Yeah.
So are you a co-host?
You have to be the host in order to control those things.
Right. So are you the host? Co-host now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So if I screw up with anything, you can jump in, right?
I am sure you won't.
Okay, so on my screen that I'm going to share, I have it in slideshow mode now.
Okay.
Yep, I see it. Okay. And Chris is back. Good. And let's see. Okay, so I
close my door.
Oh, me too.
Keep the animals out.
Do you have dogs?
Here I just have cats.
Okay.
But I have one that insists on sitting on my lap and his tail kind of flops around.
I get that.
So you are going to advance the slides for Chris?
I will.
Okay.
So if you need one advanced, Chris, let me know when, and I will click the button.
Do you see many SCORE clients, Chris? No.
I remember I had one that ultimately sold her business. It was a massage therapy kind of business out of Lakewood. I remember specifically that she was in the SCORE program, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a lot of other clients. So,
well, we can't refer people directly. We have to give them a list of attorneys, at least 3.
Sure.
But
you're on our reference list, though.
You are definitely on our reference list.
And they might not say it.
That is true.
If they do ultimately come from SCORE.
Okay, so Do you have your slides up? You're not sharing them. I
Do you
don't,
want me to share them now?
yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay.
It looks like I did a quick search of my um system, my practice management system. Looks like maybe three um clients were related to score, something like that.
Okay, can you see now?
Oh,
I see the score
Logo?
pre uh, PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
I don't, I'm worried about what's happening here.
Chris sees it. Native.
So I see, at least on my layout, it says welcome score for the life of your business, SBA at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
My name, my law firm's name up at the top, and then at least for me on the right hand margin is a little cutout or a little picture of all three of us, our little screens.
Okay. So I just switched
Yep.
back.
Yep.
Second.
It looks like it's working fine. From my view, it's working fine.
Anita, you can't see it?
Uh, yes, I can, but
Good.
I'm hearing something behind you. So now it's
Oh,
gone.
I I have no, okay. Do you want me to press start webinar? It's about 2 minutes before so people can come in. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're waiting for a couple more people to come in. And in the meantime, I do want to let you know that after this presentation, you will receive a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. And we will start momentarily. Okay. My name is Sharon Rose. I'm a SCORE mentor with the Cleveland chapter, and I wanted to just give you hide that a little bit of information about SCORE before we get into Chris's presentation on business law. So, as you know, SCORE is a large network of volunteers all over the country, probably about 10,000 of us, who love to mentor people who are starting small businesses or growing their businesses or transitioning from their businesses. So no matter what stage your business is in or what kind of business you have, SCORE has a mentor for you. And it's very, very easy to request a mentor, which we'll show you in a couple of minutes. As you all know, SCORE businesses drive our national economy through business formation, job creation, and wealth building. So it's our mission to foster vibrant small business communities. Do that through mentoring and through education, just like this workshop. So it is our goal to give every person the support they need to thrive as a small business owner. We do this without charge, which is very exciting. So all of our volunteers give freely of their time for as long as you need. And you can see the impact of that. This is the 2023 impact of our volunteer services, which includes, again, mentoring and the workshops. You can see that we've created over 31,000 businesses this year across the country, and we've created over 152,000 jobs. So we're very, very proud of those statistics. And you can see our demographics are all kinds of people on the bottom left: women, any minorities, disabilities, veterans. And again, we serve over 1,500 communities across the country. We serve all demographics. We are excited. Our website, score.org, is a phenomenal resource, and we have hubs for many of the different demographic groups that you see right there. So if you are a Black entrepreneur, you can go right to that site and find information targeted for Black entrepreneurs, and so on for the rest of those and others as well. We have a very our code of ethics is quite good, and it's totally derived to protect you as our clients. It's very important that all of our mentors know that they're not permitted to make money in any way from any of the SCORE clients, and that everything that we talk about is totally confidential. This is how you can request a mentor. If you go to score.org, which you see in the address bar up at the top over here, and type in your zip, you will most likely see a button like this somewhere on the screen. This changes all of the time, but all you need to do is enter your zip code, click the button, request a mentor, fill out just a very brief amount of contact information and what you're interested in, and someone will contact you within 48 hours. So that is as difficult as it is, or really quite easy. So we are able to operate and work with you for free because the U.S. Congress funds us and SBA supports us. So we are able to work with you at no charge, just reiterating that. I know we've said that. And all 10,000 of us. This is where you go to, again, www.score.org to request a mentor. Okay, without further ado, we are very lucky to have Chris Corpus come discuss small business legalese with you. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris to introduce himself and move forward. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the folks in the audience. My name is Chris Corpus. Obviously, I'm an attorney. Grew up here on the west side of Cleveland. Graduated from college down at Ashland. Then I worked for a handful of years. Went back to law school. Graduated from Case Western in 2000. Worked at a couple of different size law firms. Started off at a very small law firm for a couple of years. Then I worked at a medium-sized law firm with about 30 attorneys. Did a little bit of all different kinds of law. And then back in 2016, I took the entrepreneur jump, just like you all are either contemplating or have already done. Started my own law firm back in 2016. I've been doing this, heavens, going on, I guess it's 8 years now. And I enjoy it. There's a lot of risks, a lot of challenges, just like you experience, a lot of what ifs, a lot of unknowns, taking that leap. Then I just focus on doing business and corporate work for clients, commercial real estate, and trademarks. So everything we're going to talk about today, I help my clients with quite frequently. That's basically all I do. Anything else that comes in the door with a client needing some legal help, if it doesn't fall into those buckets, I refer that out to someone who does that quite frequently. So that's one of the PSA announcements. Is whenever you do hire an attorney, for no matter what it is, that you ask them how many times that they've done this task that you're asking them to do in the last year, and how many times over the last, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years. Because as a lawyer, I could practice just about any area of law, but it doesn't mean I do it very well. So ultimately, those are a couple of questions to ask because there are attorneys who are very focused on their practice areas that, whatever your question is, they probably do quite often. And that's probably the best representation you will get. And then just for a little bit of housekeeping, I guess, I know there's a chat function and feature, but I have found that usually I like to take questions as the presentation is going. And it seems to work well when you're live in person. But over the video, it makes it, I found it's pretty difficult to try to monitor questions and read questions in the chat, and also try to remember what I'm saying to the group. So any questions, would probably be at the end, just to let you know. So go ahead and you can forward the slide. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about business entity selection, doing business with a partner, franchising or operating an independent business, site selection, which would be if you're looking to locate the business outside of your home, whether you're looking to buy or rent a location, some general contract issues, and some general intellectual property issues. So I consider this, presentation to be about a mile wide and an inch deep. We cover quite a few different topics, but not a ton of topics in real great depth. And one of the reasons is, there's people in the audience are in all different aspects of their business life cycle. And so it sort of doesn't make sense to deal too much on one issue that that the majority of people may not be experiencing. So, okay, you can forward the slide. So business entity selection, you have, yes, that's the one. You have a couple of different options. You could be a sole proprietor. You could be a general partnership. You could be a limited partnership, a limited liability company, and a corporation. So I have never purposely set up a sole proprietorship or a partnership for any clients. Generally, those just happen as a matter of law. So what would be an example of a sole proprietorship or a partnership being created just because? So say, the easiest example is always a bakery. Anyone can do that. Your baked goods may not be any good, but everyone can bake. So you bake some cookies, you say, I'm going to sell them at the local street fair. You buy a booth for $50, and then you sell your cookies, and then you take home whatever money that you made. So just the fact of you making something and then selling it and receiving money, that means you're a sole proprietor. You have not created any type of corporate entity to do business under. You're doing business under your own name, checking accounts in your own name. You're personally liable for everything that happens in the operation of your business. A general partnership is the exact same example, except instead of you doing it on your own, you're doing it with a friend. So it's you and at least one other person operating this business. Again, you probably did not do anything specifically to create this general partnership. It just happened because you both are selling the cookies that you made. Again, the negative of a general partnership is that you are personally liable for everything that you do and everything that your business partner does. So that is one of the main negatives of being a sole proprietor or a general partnership is the unlimited personal liability that you have as the owner. And so that's where, the limited liability company and the corporation come in. The limited liability company and corporation, as long as you don't do anything illegal or fraudulent, then you respect the corporate formalities of keeping your business and personal assets separate. As long as you don't do anything illegal, fraudulent, things like that, then you're not personally going to be liable for the acts of the company. So same example, you set up your limited liability company, sell your cookies at the street fair, someone gets sick, they file a lawsuit against your company, make a claim against your company. It's your company that's going to be responsible and not you individually. So with the limited liability company and the corporation, you have that limited liability protection. You only potentially can lose to a creditor the amount that you've invested into the company. So no different than a publicly traded company going bankrupt. If you own stock in that company, the creditors don't come knock on your door and say, hey, the company still owes the creditors some more money. Please provide us, an extra $100 per share that you own. That the company just ends up being worthless. Shareholders don't have any other obligation to put any more money into the company. And then limited partnerships, those were popular before limited liability companies were created back in the 1990s. I've never created a limited partnership for anyone. Because you still have a general partner in the limited partnership. The general partner potentially does have unlimited personal liability. And there's just no reason for that because you can create your limited liability company in such a structure to mirror that limited partnership structure. If you could move ahead one slide. Okay, you can go back one. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't need to move forward a slide. So with the limited liability company and corporation, if I create 20 new companies for clients, I'm probably creating 19 limited liability companies and one corporation. It's just the limited liability company is an unbelievably flexible organization. It's freedom of contract. You could almost agree to just about whatever you want within that limited liability company operating agreement, and it's going to be enforceable. There's very few things that you cannot alter or change in the limited liability company law here in the state of Ohio. So as a limited liability company, the owner of the company you're referred to as a member. And as a corporation, the owners are referred to as shareholders, just different terminology. For a corporation, you have officers of your company, like a president, secretary, treasurer. In a limited liability company, you can, if you so choose, but in a limited liability company, that president is generally referred to as a manager. And then the members of the limited liability company get to determine whether they're going to be member managed or manager managed. And who's going to have what decision-making responsibilities, who can make a decision without having to get other member approval, other owner approval. What happens if you have to buy a ream of paper at the Office Max store? Do you need to get approval from your other owners, or do you have the authority to do that on your own? So you have a lot of different options in customizing your agreement between the owners. And then with a corporation, again, you have your shareholders make one group of decisions. The shareholders elect the board of directors. They're basically like the 10,000-foot decision-making group. And then the board of directors elect the officers, president, secretary, and treasurer, and they're the boots on the ground decision makers. But ultimately, as a corporation, you're very similar or no different than like General Motors. You have a division of decision making. You have shareholders, directors, officers making decisions. You can enter into a close corporation agreement and do away with some of those formalities. But ultimately, unless you have enter into a separate agreement, you're no different than General Motors. You have to have an annual meeting the shareholders and directors once a year. And with a limited liability company, you do not have to have that meeting, that annual meeting. I recommend it. I think it's a good idea, but ultimately that's not required. But again, I think the biggest issue, the takeaway is the difference between a sole proprietorship and a partnership, unlimited personal liability, limited liability company and a corporation, limited liability. You're only liable to creditors up to the amount you've invested in your company as a capital contribution. And then once you create a limited liability company or corporation, there's tax designations to be aware of. I generally will give general information to clients about the tax designations you can make. And I recommend those clients review those with your accountant. And so by default, all right, let me take one step back. When limited liability companies were created in the 1990s, the IRS did not create separate tax classifications for limited liability companies. The IRS dumps limited liability companies into predefined tax boxes based on the number of owners that the company has. So if you have one member of your limited liability company, then for federal tax purposes, you're taxed as a sole proprietorship. If you have more than one member, then for federal tax purposes, you're taxed as a general partnership. But then the limited liability company also has the ability to make the sub S tax election and be taxed like a corporation. And as a corporation, by default, you are considered to be a C corporation, which means your corporate entity pays tax. That's that lower corporate tax rate. Ultimately, it can be considered to be inefficient because you pay tax when you earn the money as a C corporation, and then you pay tax again when you distribute a profit distribution. But there are some situations where it can be beneficial to be taxed as a C corporation. And as the corporation, you also have the ability to make the sub S tax election. So the sub S tax election, that is that pass-through entity selection, your corporate entity itself does not pay tax, and all of the taxes flow through to your personal tax return. So even though as a sub S, make it a sub S tax election, you'll file a tax return at the corporate deadline in March. On March 15th, you will not tax on that day because all the tax flows through to your personal tax return, and then you pay that tax on April 15th. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So then what about being, doing business with a business partner? So you have sole ownership issues, business partnership issues. I'm not anti-partner, but partners, a business partnership is, in my opinion, it's no different than a marriage. And marriages struggle if there's no communication, there's lack of communication, goals, people are not on the same page. People aren't sure what their obligations are, what's being expected of them by the other business partner. And sadly, marriages, what does it have, a 50% divorce rate? In my experience has been general partnerships have about the same breakup rate. So ultimately I'm generally very cautious with business owners saying they want to have a business partner. Typically it's one person's idea and someone else is around in the periphery or on the sidelines. And just because someone's going to be a good worker and maybe the person is indispensable, doesn't mean that person meets in my opinion, the definition of a business partner. And generally the first question I ask is, okay, COVID happens, business went to zero all in a day. So you still have bills to pay. So what happens when your company needs $20,000 and you have business partners that are 60-40? So that means one business partner has to come up, the company needs to inject capital into the company, or the shareholders need to inject capital into the company. And so the 60% owner should be putting in $12,000. The 40% owner should be putting in $8,000 of their own capital to make this company work and continue to be in existence. So when you ask that question to the 40% owner, okay, well, I get it. You want the good side, you want the benefit, you want the profit distributions if there are any. But what happens when we get to the bad or the ugly part of this equation? Are you willing to put the $8,000 into the company because that's what we need to operate? And generally, my experience has been a lot of times they're like, no, I either don't have the money or I have a better way to spend my money than putting my money into quote unquote your business since you're the majority owner. Then to me, that person's not partner worthy. That person's just a really good worker and someone that you should value and pay accordingly. You can even give them a bonus based on profit that's made. But you really, once you ask someone, I'd like you to be a business partner, then you go to the attorney and say, I want so and so to be a business partner. I want them to have 10%, 5%, 20%, whatever. And then the attorney goes, really? Did you think about it? And then the owner goes, oh, you're right. Maybe I don't. Maybe I can just get them a a bonus based on how well the company does or how well that worker does. And but once you ring that bell, pretty hard to unring it. Pretty hard to go back to the worker and say, hey, I talked to my attorney and it's really not a good idea for you to be a business partner. And then they're like, wow, really? You're a jerk. So it's really it's difficult to unsay that it's difficult to unhave that conversation. But the partnerships that I do find to be successful, there's very clear and delineated responsibilities between the owners. They all know their obligations, what's expected of them. They all generally they don't have overlapping skill sets. You don't have two cooks that both want to cook. Someone's got to go out and sell the stuff. Someone's got to be in marketing and sales. And so if you have, skill sets that don't overlap, that are complementary to each other, I think those are some keys to having a successful business partnership. But it's having regular meetings, having discussions amongst each other. What are your goals? Where are we expanding to? What are our struggles? Do we need to pull back? Because one of my examples is always, how did those school projects go? You have 5 people on a project. Did all 5 people do 20% of the work? And generally, I think the answer is no. And so, I had some students come, talk to me, and I said, there was like 4 of them, and there was a class project, and like, this is pretty cool. Maybe we can make a business out of this. And then, I gave the exact same example, saying, how's the school project going? Did all of you pull your 25% weight? And is everyone, kind of put in as much time into this as the other people? And then one of the students held back and said, no, I'm the one doing all the work. They're all kind of just along for the ride, and I'm doing all the grunt work. And so it's important to get that, have that understanding up front that, granted, I do see the negative side of business partnerships. Usually if a partnership's going well, I don't hear from them. And I only hear from the ones where someone wants to get redeemed. So it is something to understand, because people change in life circumstances change. Maybe you get married, maybe you have a kid, maybe you move, maybe you got to take care of a parent. You go back to school, you don't have as much time as you used to. So it's important to have all those understandings up front. And then I include in here, financial considerations. I had one client keep telling me he had an investor. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, how much equity is he going to get? He's like, well, none. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, if he's investing in your company, that's like Shark Tank. He gives you $100,000 and you give him 25% of your company. And he was like, oh, I don't think so. I go, do you have to pay him back? He's like, yeah, over time I have to pay him back. I'm like, that's a loan. That is not an investor. That is a lender. That's a bank. Even if it's a person, that person is still a lender. If you have to pay them back, no matter whether your business succeeds or not, then that person's a lender. And so ultimately, I just threw that in there because I think it's important to understand, to make sure you understand that terminology, whether someone's going to be have an equity ownership in your company, or if they're going to give you a loan. And if I think it's always important to have these things in writing. And I think it's even more important to have in writing if you get money from a family member or a friend. As to, are they going to have an equity interest in your company? Is it a loan? When is the loan going to have to get repaid? What are the terms of repayment? Because if they ultimately see that you're driving around in a super nice car and you have a bunch of fancy new stuff, and they're like, wow, I thought I gave you that money for your business and not for you to start wearing really expensive clothes, then some people are going to get upset, possibly. And if they're friends or family members, it might be difficult. You might lose a friend and you might have difficult conversations at family gatherings. So it's important to have, it be very clear as if someone, provides you with money, is that a loan? What are the repayment terms? If it's going to be equity, what kind of oversight or any type of interest do they have in the company? So, okay, you can go to the next slide. Franchising or independent businesses. I have clients that are both, mostly more independent businesses than franchise businesses, but you can be successful in either. I think for franchising, you really have to vet the franchisor. You have to look to see how old the franchise is, how many franchisees they have, what kind of support do they give. You know, talk to some old franchisees, find out how happy they are. Because once you're in, it's a big financial commitment, and you want to make sure that you are ultimately understand what you're getting into. If you're a creative person and you always are tinkering, my opinion is a franchise probably is not for you. Because if you're going into a franchise, you're going into the franchisor system and structure, and there's very, very, very little room for creativity. They have their menu, they have their operations manual that you have to follow lockstep. And if you have all this, like, I want to tweak this and I want to try this, and I'm always looking to do something new, you're probably going to get very, very frustrated in a franchising network system. If you're very creative, you're always tinkering, like something new, like a challenge, like the unknown, then probably an independent business is best for you. Just because, you have the ability to make mistakes. You have the ability to try things, and see if things will work. Because theoretically, the franchise has already tried. They've already done their, through being around for years, they've already found out what works and what doesn't work. And so they try to focus on what does work, and try to perfect that system and that model. But you have to be careful, because you hear that maybe there's a 7% royalty on all your sales, but there's royalties that are hidden, technology royalties, marketing royalties, and all these others. So you do have to truly understand how many cents out of every dollar off the top go right to the franchisor. But I have clients that are franchisees, and they make a ton of money based on following the franchisor system. But ultimately, you just have to figure out what's going to work for you. If you have no business experience and ultimately you're saying, hey, I need someone to hold my hand, I don't want to make mistakes, then maybe a franchise is right for you. So there's a lot of there's even a franchise that's it's called FranNet, and they're a franchise that are a franchise matchmaker. They put the potential owners through different personality tests and, business knowledge tests, and then figure out some fits for you that might work as a franchise system, whether you're going to be an absentee owner, whether you're going to be present every day at the business. So ultimately, you do have options, but just really understanding the benefits and the drawbacks of both being an independent business owner and a franchise. Like I'm an independent business owner, obviously. I'm not aware of any franchises that are law firms, and sometimes it's lonely. It's just me. I don't have any business partners. And you try things and you give it a whirl and see what happens. But ultimately, I'm happy with my business, and I would not foresee myself being in a franchise model. But that's not for everyone. So, and it's great. You have options. So, okay, next slide. All right, site selection. So this is if you're going to have a business, where you're going to operate it. Are you going to operate out of your home? Are you going to rent a location? Are you going to buy a building? What type of business is it? All you have to do is contact your local building or zoning department, give them the address, and then let them know, hey, I'm planning on operating or running this type of business out of this location. And they'll tell you right away whether that's going to be a permitted use or it's not a permitted use, and you have to look somewhere else or get a variance for your particular business. So that should always be even if a prior business was in that same location, I always recommend that the business owner confirm with the zoning or building department that this type of business is an acceptable use or a permitted use in this location, because the prior business owner could have gotten a variance, and that variance does not transfer over to a new owner. And heaven forbid you sign a lease and have an architect and start doing build out, and then you find out you can't open. So it's stop in, say hi, make a phone call, and the people in the building or the zoning office are very friendly, very helpful. They don't want you to become an enforcement issue. They're happy to discuss with you whatever issues you have. And and you can have say you're an HVAC company or electrical company or a plumbing, service company, and you might be able to run your business out of a particular location. But if you're like, but I have a fleet of 15 vans, and they're like, oh boy, you ain't parking those vans here. This isn't zoned for that, you have to be in an industrial park if you're going to be parking your 15 vans on site. So even though you can have your storefront, plumbing shop, at this particular location, as soon as you start wanting to park your work vans in that location, that changes the zoning. If you're trying to run a business out of your home, generally you can operate a business out of your home as long as you don't have like retail hours where customers come to your home and pick up their stuff they're buying, work out at your home because you have a workout studio in your basement, you're a trainer or a coach. So ultimately, generally you can run a business out of your home as long as you don't have retail customers coming into your home. Your residential streets are not made for that type of traffic. You cannot put the neon open sign in your window where people are going to be coming to your house to buy and pick up things. Generally, the city will never find out about that, but who's going to know? The neighbor that you made mad. And then the neighbor's going to contact the city and say, ding dong over here is running a business out of their home, and please, shut them down. So generally, the city is never going to find out that you're running a retail business out of your home. It's going to be a neighbor that you made mad, and they're going to turn you in. So you do have to be careful about what kind of business you run out of your home. If you are running a business out of your home, maybe you're a bakery, and you bake out of your home, which you're allowed to do, certain things out of your, considered a cottage bakery. You have to make sure you have the right insurance to make sure that if you do ever have a fire or something in your kitchen, that that claim is going to be covered, because they're going to come. I had a fire in my kitchen. Oh, okay, we'll send someone out. And then someone comes out and they see just tubs and tubs and buckets of sprinkles and flour and all this, the wrappings and wrappers and everything. And they're like, "What are you doing in here?" Well, I got a little business I run. And they're like, "Oh, okay, so." When did the fire? I was making, cookies for the upcoming, street fair. There's a chance that loss would not be covered because your homeowner's insurance is specifically going to say that businesses are not covered underneath your general standard homeowner's insurance policy. So insurance is a big deal, making sure that you have the proper coverage. And if you are zoned properly and you do have retail customers coming in and out of your house, if a retail customer slips and falls in your house, your homeowner's insurance isn't going to cover it. So you need to make sure you have a rider for that. The liquor licenses, they're a unique animal in Ohio. It's pretty much, we're still almost, the laws are very, very similar to still back in the Prohibition days. So you do have to make sure that, every city has a quota of how many liquor permits they're allowed to grant and the type of liquor permits. So you do need to make sure that where that the address of your business location, a liquor permit is available. Sometimes you have the ability to so ultimately, you do want to make sure that you understand those liquor laws. And also, all owners of the business, I believe, have to go through a background check. So you need to make sure you don't have a criminal problem with any of the people who may be owners of that business. So you have to kind of plan accordingly on ownership of a business that has a liquor license. Okay, next slide. So lease issues. You decide that you're operating your business out of your home. You've grown, and you're looking to lease a location, whether it's a strip mall, in a larger area, a larger mall, or it could even just be you have an office business and you're looking to lease a location in an office building. These terms that are listed on this slide are going to be different in every lease, but all of these terms will be in every lease somewhere. So the biggest is your term and renewals. How long is your initial term going to be? Will you have any automatic renewals that as long as you're not in default, you will be able to renew the lease? And it usually says in the lease what the rent will be in the renewal terms. The length of the lease term is, what would you call it, inverse of the amount of rent that you pay. So a shorter lease term, generally the more rent you pay per month. The longer the lease term, the more negotiating leverage you have to ask for a lower monthly lease rate. And why is that? If you have a 6-month lease term or a 1-year lease term, the landlord's got to turn around and start marketing it in a few months to get a new tenant. If you have a 10-year lease term or a 5-year lease term, now the landlord can already book 60 months worth of rent without having to release the location. But if you're a brand new business, you may be willing to pay more in rent to have the flexibility to terminate the lease early, rather than saying, well, I want lower rent, but I have no idea if my business is going to be successful. and agree to a 7-year lease, and you're like, oh boy, you're like, after 2 years, you're like, this was a mistake. I need to go back to my home. It's not, my business didn't grow like I thought it would, but you got another 5 years on your lease. That's a problem. So you need to, look at, your business plan, how mature your business is and things like that. Then monthly rent, percentage rent, and CAM. So every lease should have a monthly rent figure in there. And that's just literally how much money you're going to pay every month. CAM, or common area maintenance, that could either be built into the monthly rent, or that could be a separate charge that the landlord charges you. And that's for the common areas, which would be like, so if you're in a building with 5 other tenants, you all don't own the parking lot. You all don't have exclusive use to the parking lot. You're all sharing that parking lot in common with each other. So the landlord is the party responsible to care for the parking lot, stripe the parking lot, snow, plowing, salting, cutting of grass. If you have common bathrooms, cleaning the common bathrooms and hallways and elevators and things like that. So you want to understand, what that monthly fee is going to be, or yearly fee for your common area maintenance. Then percentage rent, pretty common in malls where the landlord actually does things to drive traffic to the mall, like Santa Claus, Easter Bunny, concerts. So with that, then typically the landlord requests for a percentage rent to be paid. So it's a percentage of your sales. And that's going to be, pretty clear. It'll be a paragraph in your lease that talks about percentage rent. You tenant having to provide the landlord with financial, periodic financial statements and things like that. Triple net lease. Someone's got to pay the property taxes, the insurance for the building in case it burns down, and for capital improvements. If there's a triple net lease, that means that the tenant is going to pay its proportionate share of the property taxes, insurance, the casualty insurance on the building, and also for capital improvements like a new roof. Or those are going to be landlord's responsibilities. So you want to double check in your lease to see who's responsible for the paying for the property taxes, insurance, and this is the insurance in case the building burns down, and also capital improvements. Resurfacing the parking lot, putting a new roof on is usually a big one. Heating and cooling systems. And then landlord responsibilities and tenant responsibilities. These are, I say they're handcuffed together. They go hand in hand. If something breaks, one of you's got to fix it. And it's going to say in the lease in general who's responsible for fixing that. So you really want to look closely at the tenant responsibilities as to repairing, maintaining, and the big one is replacing. Because a replacement could result in a capital improvement. If you have to replace a furnace, that could last for 20 years, but your lease is only for 3 years. You're like, well, this is nuts. Why would I be, paying for the replacement of a furnace when it's going to be there for maybe 17 years after I leave? So you really want to make sure you understand who's responsible for what repairs or replacements or maintenance. Personal guarantee. So one of the first slides we talked about the owners of limited liability companies and corporations not being personally responsible for any debts of the company. But by contract, whether it's through a lease, getting a loan from a bank, you can agree as the owner to personally guarantee the debt or liability of your company. And it's very clear that you're doing that. There's going to be a separate document that says personal guarantee. I personally guarantee that I'm going to be responsible to pay this debt of the company if the company doesn't pay it. And, so this is a contract. This is you specifically choose to do this. Whereas the limited liability protection that you get that we talked about earlier is sort of like from a tort, from an accident. Someone slips and falls, someone gets sick on something you ate. That's where you get your limited liability protection of the corporation or limited liability company entities. Where here, some people may choose not to do business with you if they're going to provide credit or money to your corporate entity, but they're only going to provide that to you if you personally guarantee it. So that's something that you have to decide if you're willing to do that. Because if you're not willing to give the personal guarantee, then maybe like a bank is not going to loan you money. So you have to weigh those two. And then signage, ultimately you just want to understand exactly where on this premises that you can place your signage. What kind of sign? Can it be your logo? Does the specific requirement as to color and sizing of letters, so it doesn't matter what your unique logo looks like? The landlord wants everything to be uniform. Can you put any signage out on the pylon sign by the street? Do you need to put directional signs up in the parking lot or on the building so people can find you? Do you need to put directional signs inside the building so people can find where you're located? And you want to talk to the landlord about that up front before you sign your lease. You want to get the landlord to commit to where you can and can't put signage, because before you sign the lease is as a tenant when you have the most power. Because you're still in your dating phase at that point between you and the landlord, and that's the time you have the ability to extract as many concessions as you can from the landlord as to where things can go and what can go where. Do you want signage on your windows? So landlords sometimes go nuts and don't allow any signage on their windows. They don't like their windows to get blocked out because they want people driving by to be able to see that there's activity in the strip center. So you really need to understand. Maybe you have a female workout studio and you want to put up like protective screening on the windows because you don't want people looking in at people exercising. So you really have to kind of look and see how you want your business to look and operate. Restrictions and covenants. So say you are an independent coffee store. You may tell your landlord, hey, I'm willing to rent from you, but I don't want you rent to any other coffee shops. Or if there is a Dunkin' Donuts in the strip center, then more than likely the landlord had to agree that the landlord will not rent to any other stores that sell coffee or baked goods. So you need to make sure you understand what your business is going to be. Do you want your landlord not to rent to any other competitors? And then also looking to see, are you restricted from any potential operations in your business or expanding your business? So the lease is, my experience is it's the most important document that your business signs. And why is that? It's probably your biggest yearly expense. Aside from an employee, your lease payment over the course of a year is probably your business expense. And you need to make sure to the best of your ability that you get it right. So, or as right as you can based on the market demographics, ability to negotiate, things like that. Okay, next slide. Then just general contract issues. Probably the biggest thing is know what you're signing. You should read a contract and you should understand every paragraph that's in it. If you don't understand a paragraph that's in it, that's a problem because you don't know what you are agreeing to. Because every paragraph or provision in a lease has some sort of purpose. There's probably allocating a risk from one party to another. So you want to make sure that you understand what's in these documents. And a lot of times there's a ton of legalese, mumbo jumbo in there that's even hard sometimes for an attorney to parse through and understand. A lot of attorneys, they don't like to use punctuation, and you'll have a sentence that's 5 lines long with no punctuation. So you just need to, if you sign something, it's presumed that you understand it. So making sure that you understand what you're signing. And you're like, I just need a distributor agreement on, and then you look on the internet, distributor agreement, you print it off and you sign it. You're like, you have no idea what you just signed or what you're proposing. So even though documents, pretty much any document you can imagine is readily available on the internet for you just to search and print off. If you don't understand what's in it, it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. Maybe that's someone else's deal. Maybe you should have different terms in your deal and someone else's deal. Just because someone else used the document doesn't mean it's the right document for you to use. And then your statement of deliverables in compensation or payment terms, I think those are really important. It's, again, even when you're dealing with a customer, it's all expectations. It's getting everyone on the same page. And that's what those two do is, when am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? What's the time frame of me getting the work done? Are you given any type of warranty or guarantee, with the work that you're doing, or as is? When do you expect to get paid? Are you going to ask for a down payment? Do you ask for progress payments? Do you wait, the project's going to take 3 weeks and you get payment of 100% of it 3 weeks from now? So part of it is you want to, with the compensation terms or payment terms, how do you limit your risk? Part of that is asking for a down payment. Part of, like, say the biggest issue that I see clients have is with a website. How many times have I talked to a client that they're mad at the web developer because they didn't do what the client allegedly wanted them to do, and then the web developer now is going to charge more, has to do work that ultimately they're not going to get compensated for. And so when you have a big project, to have breakpoints. So you say, okay, to get this started, I need 10 or 15 or 25% down. And then within 3 weeks, I'll have for you a rendering of the website. shows you what the functionality is going to look like so that you can say, yes, you agree. So that ultimately I provide that to the client. The client signs off on it. I'm like, okay, now you need to pay another 10%. And then you move to the next phase. You're like, okay, well, here's, the next step, and the client approves it. And then, now you pay another 10% or whatever. And at the end of the day, now you maybe only have 10% of the fee that's left due and owing once you're done, as opposed to 100%. And if there is a change, you're able to do it quickly and without having to undo a lot of work you've already done. So I think it's important when you have large projects, to have check-ins, breakpoints, so that ultimately, if you do find that there's a problem or a disconnect, someone comes up and says, "Oh, I saw this so-and-so website. That's what I want it to look like." And you're like, "That is nothing like we talked about initially." That is completely a different website. It's not even, it's going to be twice the price of the functionality that you want now in your website. But having those conversations, if you have it up front, even if you're on the second, iteration of, second breakpoint of 5, you can turn around and make some changes without having lost probably a lot of effort and time. So I think it's important to have those breakpoints on big projects, so the customers know exactly what to expect. And then your boilerplate provisions, those are going to be generally, they're the same at the end of every contract. It could be like, the entire agreement clause. Anything we've talked about leading up to this agreement, if it didn't make it into the agreement, then it's not part of our terms. You have all these emails that went back and forth, all this negotiation. You're trying to say, hey, anything that didn't make it into this agreement, the parties ultimately didn't agree upon. Could be saying, where will the lawsuit be filed? What, state's law will we use to interpret the contract? You have all these kind of boilerplate provisions, but, they're not important until they're needed. And then you're like, okay, so where are we going to file a lawsuit? Oh, we have to go down to, Miami County or, wherever, Franklin County to deal with this lawsuit. Why come it's not Cuyahoga County? You're like, oh, that's what they said in the agreement. I didn't even look at that provision. So ultimately, the boilerplate provisions, they're generally relatively standard, and you don't need them until you need them. So it's important to understand what they say. All right, next slide. All right, intellectual property issues, non-disclosure agreements, patents, trademarks, and licensing. Okay, next slide. So underneath non-disclosure agreements, we have these 3 kind of, you can call them ultimately restrictive covenants. So a non-disclosure agreement, it is what it is. It's an NDA. Basically, whether you call it a confidentiality agreement, non-disclosure agreement, I'm going to disclose something to you. You agree that, as long as it's kept confidential, that you're not going to disclose it. Can be used with contractors. Maybe you're just trying to figure out if you're going to do business with someone, or you can use it for, employees. But ultimately, it's there to make sure that whatever, inside business information you have, marketing lists, client lists, are going to be kept confidential. So pretty important. If you're ever looking to sell your business, before you disclose any information to a potential buyer, they should always sign the buyer should sign a non-disclosure agreement. And then down to non-solicitation agreements, they're different than a non-compete agreement. So a non-solicitation agreement is, after you leave my job, whether you're a contractor or an employee, you can go compete with me, but you're just not allowed to steal my customers. You're not allowed to specifically call up, email, text message my customers that I allowed you to work on. So, those are, I'm a big fan of, I'm a big proponent of non-solicitation agreements. If someone says, hey, they're a worker and they're like, I'm going to go do this on my own. I think I'm done being an employee. I want to, do this on my own. Well, you should start from square one, just like I did when I started my business. I didn't introduce you to all my customers so that you can steal them all when you go start your own job. So feel free to go start your own job, but build it up on your own. Don't steal my customers that I introduced to you. So I'm a big fan of non-solicitation agreements. Non-compete agreements, whether you've heard it or not, the Federal Trade Commission about 2 weeks ago issued a nationwide ban on non-compete agreements. And lawsuits have already been filed challenging this. So we're going to see what happens. And I think it's going to be probably an expedited litigation, because this is a big deal. It impacts the whole entire country. If the law is found to be constitutional and is in effect, that means all non-compete agreements are going to be invalid, unenforceable, and you're not going to be able to allow to enter into new non-compete agreements. And if you have a non-compete agreement with an employee or a contractor, then you would have based on the current law or rule, you would have an obligation to inform every single employer or contractor that the non-compete is no longer enforceable. So we're going to see if ultimately this the non-compete rule stays enforceable or if it's going to get overturned. And the trend is for in my reading of the new non-compete rule, as long as you can still have a non-solicitation provision, as long as the non-solicitation provision does not prevent the worker from starting their own business or going to another job, then that will be ultimately a permissible non-solicitation. So you can't drape a non-solicitation in actually what would be considered, or I guess you would say you can't, put a non-compete and build it into and call it a non-solicitation, and then voila, automatic magically it will be enforceable. So you could have a non-disclosure agreement that if it's too restrictive and too broad, if it acts as a bar for someone starting a new employment, then ultimately that's going to be an unenforceable restriction on someone's ability to work at a new job. So this summer, this non-compete agreements are going to be in flux. So, all right, next slide. And then patents. I'm not a patent attorney. There are attorneys that are specifically have to pass a separate bar, a patent bar. Patents are, it's going to be something that's a unique idea that you have. So it's going to be, the patent gets filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. It's federal law, protects inventions, discoveries, and the filing fee to submit a patent is not great. The problem is it comes into, hiring your patent attorney to assist you and represent you in that. But if you think this is your idea is going to change the landscape of an industry and the other players in the industry are huge multinational companies, then you need to make sure that your idea is going to be properly protected and prepared in the patent application filed, because there's companies that they have nothing but inventors looking to invent things, and they're going to have a group of inventors and attorneys looking at your patent and trying to figure out a way to get around it. So you need to make sure that your patent is going to be properly protecting you into the future. Okay, next slide. So copyrights. When you think of a copyright, that's again, that's federal law. It's the copyrights are filed with the U.S. Library of Congress. Protects original works of authorship, and you think of music, lyrics to a song, pictures, paintings, photographs, things like that. Those are going to be what are protected by your copyright. And the filing fee is not great. That's probably filing for a copyright is one of the few areas that I recommend clients to give it a try first. It's a pretty user-friendly system to get your copyrights filed. And next slide. And then trademarks. So trademarks, you could have a state trademark, you could have a federal trademark. And trademarks are considered to be source identifiers. You're like, well, what is that? So when you see whatever the name is or the logo, you automatically know who made it. It conjures up an image in your head of quality, price, things like that. So, so what would be a trademark? So you have your shirt, and on your pocket, you have your little alligator or your Nike swoosh or something like that. That's a source identifier. That's telling you Nike made that shirt, and because Nike made that shirt, I just want to do it, or something like that, right? And so, those are going to be your source identifiers. It's, when you see, the symbol on the cup, you're like, that's a cheap cup of coffee. Or you see the symbol on the coffee cup and you're like, wow, they really overpaid for that cup of coffee. You know exactly who made it. If you have a big, huge design on your shirt, but you don't know, that doesn't help you determine who is the manufacturer of that, then that's going to be a copyrighted design. That's considered ornamental. A copyright is going to be some small little logo on your shirt pocket, on the sleeve, maybe on the back of on the neck collar, whatever it is. Could be on the hang tag from a bag. Those are your source identifiers, and that's what a trademark is for. Trademark can be a sound. It could be a symbol. So it's something that when you hear it, it identifies who the supplier of this product or service is. And like I mentioned, you have an option to file a trademark with the state of Ohio. The Secretary of State, that trademark will only be effective in the state of Ohio. Or you can have the option to file a trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Then that's a nationwide trademark that you would be the only one to use that name in that particular class of goods. And so you don't have a blanket right to only use that name across any particular class of goods. But in your class of goods and something confusingly similar, you would prohibit others from using that name. So the example would be Remington. So more than one company uses the word Remington. Remington's a gun. Remington's a shaver. At least Remington used to be an outdoor power equipment, all just the same word, but none of them were considered to be infringing of the other person's because they're such different, unique uses. Okay, next slide. So licensing, I always end up running out of time for this slide, but ultimately, if you're ever going to be looking to let someone else use your intellectual property, like your name or logo or internal business practices or procedures, or you're going to be using someone else's, then probably it's going to be subject to a license agreement. What's exactly being licensed? Are you the only one who can use that material in a certain geographic area? What are your, do you have royalty payments you have to make, or just one-time yearly fees, things like that. So you just want to make sure you understand if you're going to give up your intellectual property to someone else, that you understand what that other party is going to have and to use that, and vice versa. If you're going to be using someone else's intellectual property, then you want to make sure what rights you have and who else is going to maybe be able to use that. Okay, next slide. And then we are done. So, if we have a couple minutes, I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Hopefully, I know this is very quick, and if you have, you have my contact information here on the slide. You can always reach out to me. Just let me know that you were part of the SCORE presentation, and happy to set up a time to talk.
Great. Chris, thank you so much for your informative and clear presentation. Let me see, there's one question in the chat. Oh, okay, that was to see if everyone could see the screen. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Chris?
Everything was clear as mud.
Right. Oh, I thought it was clear. It was great. Okay. Well, if we
you were looking, so I just see a couple
there
questions.
are some questions in the Q&A.
My name, it's Chris Corpus.
Yeah. Can you have a licensed logo if you are a cottage business?
Well, I guess the licensed logo, it's more of I assume you mean a trademarked logo. So yeah, I mean, you can have a cottage business and you sell your product underneath whatever, whatever your name of your business is. You just can't have it hanging out the side. You cannot have your sign hanging out on your garage or on your front door or on your mailbox. Because theoretically, you're probably baking. Well, as a cottage business, you have to be baking out of your home, and more than likely, your zoning laws won't allow you to have a retail business operate a retail business out of your home. When I say a retail business, I mean people are walking into your home to buy stuff. So more than likely, you cannot put the name of your business on the outside of your home without risking someone from zoning coming and saying you're not allowed to have a retail business where people walk up and knock on your door and buy your stuff.
I think that's it.
Right. Well, thank you again, Chris. This was another terrific presentation by you. We really appreciate it. And if there are no other questions, you are free to leave. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Good luck.
Okay, and very quickly, you will receive a copy of this and the slides. Okay.